Orders of the day.
Consideration at report stage of Bill C-248, an act to amend the Canada National Parks Act, Ojibway National Urban Park of Canada, standing in the name of Mr. Masse.
There being no motion at report stage, the House will now proceed without debate to the putting of the question on the motion to concur in the bill at report stage. Mr. Masse, seconded by Ms. Collin, moves that Bill C-248, an act to amend the Canada National Parks Act of Ojibway National Urban Park of Canada, be concurred in at report stage.
If a member of a recognized party present in the House wishes that the motion be carried or carried on division, or wishes to request a recorded division, I would invite them to rise and indicate it to the chair.
On division? Adopted on division. Okay. Yeah, so therefore I therefore declare the motion carried on division. When shall the bill be read the third time? Now? Now. Mr. Masse, seconded by Ms. Collin, moves that Bill C-248, an act to amend the Canada National Parks Act, Ojibway National Urban Park of Canada, be now read a third time and do pass. Debate. The honourable member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise here on Bill C-248, and want to thank all the members in the House for getting it here. In particular, I want to thank the Conservative Party, the Bloc Québécois, the Green Party, and also 2 Liberal members that supported to get here. We have tried to work with the government on this. I will get into a little bit of that later. Unfortunately, to date, they have not joined at this point in time, but we shall see. I've tried to use this place as constructive as possible, especially given the fact that Canadians have shown they want us to work. Unfortunately, they have not been here at this time. But I'm going to start by referencing a quote on the Parks Canada website, which I think even itself dismantles some of the government's objections in terms of this private member's bill, which is key to our democracy. When you think about the work that goes into private members' businesses, it doesn't matter where you're from and what the legislation's about. It's our right to be able to be heard, and it's our right to change our Canada outside even the partisan envelope. And Madam Speaker, I got lucky getting picked high in the order paper for this bill, and I couldn't think of something stronger I'd want to put forth. I've been trying to push forward for a new border crossing in Windsor. My first public meeting was as a city councillor for a new public border was 1998 at Marlborough Public School. And the proposed legislation that I have today is for property next to it that goes along that entire border process, that we create a national urban park for all of Canada, protecting 200 of Canada's 500 endangered species, and is supported universally by groups that I'll get into later. But I want to read from a Facebook posting by the government's own Department of Environment. On June 23rd of last year, the Parliament of Canada on its own Facebook page posted the following. Did you know that national parks are created through the Acts of Parliament? On this day in 1887, Parliament passed the Rocky Mountain Parks Act, which established what is now Banff as the first national park in Canada. Today, there are 48 national parks. They are found in every Canadian province and territory. With the Parliament of Canada's post acknowledging the fact that national parks are created through the Acts of Parliament on the anniversary of this law for Banff, it's very helpful for this day because right now the government insists they want to go through some process that's still in a draft process to dealing with this issue, whereas what we've done is the responsible, accountable, transparent, and inclusive process through this legislation. And this legislation is going to amend the Parks Act, and that is how every single national park has been created, and this is how we actually go about fixing, I think, a situation in Windsor which is an opportunity to provide some restoration with regards to even reconciliation. And that goes in part, one of my most important partners that we have in this process is Caldwell First Nations. So to draw a picture for citizens out there that aren't familiar with the area, where I'm from in southern Ontario, the Detroit River runs right through our city. but there's also a connection of the lake system as well for the Great Lakes. Now, what's happened over the past is, unfortunately, we've done what a lot of places have done. We chopped and milled and cut all the trees. We moved to high agriculture and manufacturing. It's left very little green space. But because of where we're located in our temperate environment, we have Carolinian forests that provide basically a refuge for species at risk, whether it be trees, fauna, whether they be animals, amphibians, like the Massasauga rattler and others, that is endangered. And similar to many other places in the country, we're fighting to get back these green spaces. So there's a unique element of this process that needs to be put to the test of metal, and that is that this is all public land. There is no private land. The government will say now, out of desperation, there's some private property there, but they have not actually provided any geography about those locations and those things we would want to get out anyways. And it's important to note, Madam Speaker, we are unifying public lands through this process. And there is absolutely no position whatsoever we want other than the fact that we can actually work with the City of Windsor that supports this bill. We can work with Caldwell First Nations that supports this bill. The province of Ontario just passed a motion in the legislature about this bill. And on top of that, we have several environmental groups that have all shown support for this bill because it is truly grassroots, and it comes from the fact that we have these endangered species that need a better level of protection that they get through a hodgepodge system now. So one of the things that we did fight for along this area of the Detroit River, as it extends into other parts of the city and along that front, is shoreline that the Windsor Port Authority still has not transferred over yet. And I want to remind, I think, all members of Parliament here is that port authorities are actually the creations of Parliament under the Marine Transportation Act. And that is no different than a Canada Post or something else. They operate through regulation or so forth, but it is the people's land. And so that area, they tried to bulldoze and clear cut it. And fortunately, I was then working with one of the developers of the area that they tried to actually get involved in the project, called them up and said that, do you realize what's happening? And do you realize what you're going to be part of? That person took out their actual position in support of the project, despite at their own cost. And the property later on is now saved for the future. It's supposed to be transferred. We're still waiting for it to happen. And there is no time to wait, Madam Speaker. When you think about the property I'm talking about right now, when the Gordie Howe Bridge next to it is built, there's going to be potentially 40,000 vehicles per day that could actually traverse there, and up to 10,000 transport trucks per day. And we do not have environmental assessments on how that's going to take place. The Gordie Howe Bridge is a large, large structure of infrastructure going across 2.5 kilometers of the Detroit River, and it goes on territory from Caldwell First Nations. And briefly, I want to quote Caldwell First Nations, in particular Chief Duckworth, who's been here to Ottawa with me several times and also appeared at press conferences and basically is a mentor in many respects. They are part of the restitution of this country. Caldwell First Nations was promised, when they fought with the British, the Point Pelee area. And after there, they were actually burned out of their properties, and they went through a long process and finally had a good settlement. Now they're actually setting up their proper reserve. They're doing very well with other types of initiatives, and they are the land stewards of this area. And that is one of the good news stories. And they have stood shoulder to shoulder during this process. In fact, they were the first group that I brought down when I was trying to save Ojibway shores to see if they actually had interest in that property at that time. And they didn't, because they wanted to go towards Leamington next to Point Pelee. They have that land now. And the beautiful part of this story, Madam Speaker, is where they were actually forced out in the past, they are now co-managers of Point Pelee National Park. And with this park that we're proposing here, they will also be co-managers of that park. This is a highlight story in terms of what we should be doing right. And Chief Duckworth, who's been very good on this, said this at committee: "We know that we need a legislative framework in order to make this national park happen. And I'm here to support the work that's been done, the hard work that's been done, and the hard work going on forward." They've sent several letters, and it's actually gone to all the members in this chamber, and they've received those letters. And again, they have showed a path forward. And we even have across the Detroit River, the Wyandotte community supporting this. And I'll get into a little bit this because it's international. So we actually have the Wyandotte community, another Aboriginal organization, that has sent in its letter of support for this. I want to point out the kind of the things that when you look at a private member's business and nonpartisan and how you can do it, is the member from Essex has been terrific on this. He has been supportive in the past. We've seen members come and go, and one of the members before is Jeff Watson, who I used to work with from the Conservative parties, even though we may have not seen each other all the time together. At the same time, we knew how to work on local interests. He supported this. And the member for Essex, the current member for Essex, said this: "This is a very unique opportunity for the folks of Essex. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We are somewhat landlocked in Windsor, Essex, in that we're surrounded by 3 bodies of water. I've spoken extensively with Mayor Dilkins, the Mayor of Windsor, Mayor Bondi, the Mayor of LaSalle, and Mr. Watson, the previous Member of Parliament. We've done our due diligence. Everybody says this is a fantastic thing to do." And, you know, he's also brought up an issue that I think gets undercovered and reported on this, is about mental health and getting out to other spaces. So I want to thank the member for Essex for that, because sometimes we lose some of those other ways that we view a lens on things, and that's why it's been important for me to actually have that type of support. I've also wanted to thank the Bloc Québécois, making sure that this is understood as being a very unique project and is really refined to our area. What maybe people don't know is that Sandwich Town, that is right next to this, is the oldest European settlement west of Montreal, with a Francophone culture that is still part of the rich vibrancy that we've had. In fact, the Detroit River, with its First Nations and the French settlements, actually did the seigneurial system where farming came up, and so we have a number of French names through our entire city system that come up, and they run north-south, and then when the British came later, they went east-west with British names. So we actually have this combination, but the Francophonie culture is very strong. In fact, it's a couple blocks from my house where actually a new hub center is there, so the language is going stronger with some of our new Canadians, which is also by this area. And Madam Speaker, this is a social justice issue in many respects, because if we amend the Parks Act that we want to do in this, it'll give it the same stature of Point Pelee and other parks that are out there, and it deserves it because of the hundreds of endangered species. But on top of that, the area that it's next to, as I referenced, Sandwich Town, has been one of the poorest places in Canada in many respects, with child poverty and single mothers and a series of different poverty issues that we've dealt with over the years, because the international border, and Matty Maroon, a private American billionaire, he's passed away now, his son owns the property now, has put a lot of basically interesting and very difficult problems over the number of years, including buying and boarding up homes. And why this is important is that we need to do this right. When we fought to get the Gordie Howe Bridge, there was those that said we should twin the Ambassador Bridge, and even this Prime Minister actually gave them an order in council to do that in the last few years ago, and let a billionaire family have their way with Canada. We said no to that. OMERS, one of the largest pension funds, wanted to run a truck route through my riding. We said no to that. What did we do? We fought for the right thing, which is a brand new public crossing, and it was a compromise that we got, which is now the Gordie Howe Bridge, which will provide economic security for all of us, and it'll provide environmental advantages. And the same battle is happening right here. The government, which we said we were open to amendments, and I worked with the minister after they voted against it. We had meetings and several different things. They went to committee with those amendments, and their own Liberal member ruled the minister's amendments out of order. And then I was asked later by the Liberals in the morning, what happened? And I said, well, first of all, your parliamentary secretary and others weren't there. And second of all, I don't know. You have to figure out what your own party's going on, because in 20 years here, I've never seen a minister's own amendments ruled out by a minister's member. And that was, something I can't explain. And we want them to be there. That's why I actually agreed with the amendments, and we work with them. But I want to put that past, because this is so important for our future. Again, time is of the essence. And what was clear that came out of the committee hearings from the different departments is that they even admitted that eventually they might have to adopt my process, because theirs is still in draft and they don't know what they're doing. So we're not getting on about the other urban parks that are out there. They're being proposed as a rubber stamp way of going about the different areas. And what we're saying is, as you're figuring that out, we have a unique thing in the Windsor-Detroit region on the environment and also the land that we're looking to consolidate that is clear, crystal, and can move forward. And we have limited time because of the Gordie Howe Bridge coming in, and there's been no environmental assessments for this. And the importance of this, Madam Speaker, is clear and evident when even across the river, I have a letter here from John Hardig, and John Hardig is one of the premier environmental persons in the Michigan area. And he writes on one of his things, Detroit benefits of Windsor's Ojibway National Urban Park, or another title was Windsor's Ojibway National Urban Park, quote, benefits to Detroit. And it talks about the park, Madam Speaker. It talks about how it will celebrate history, enhance cross-border trail tourism, become a destination for choice, economic benefits, strengthen trans-boundary conservation benefits, and help change the perception of our area. There's many benefits to this park system that we have here. And again, Madam Speaker, I want to revisit the fact that the way that you legally create national urban parks right now in Canada is through changing the Parliament of Canada's Act. And why the Liberals would want us to have something less than that, I don't know, but these endangered species and the people need this type of protection, and we are following that due process. So as I've noted, the City of Windsor supports this, the Mayor and City Council. Councillor Fred Francis presented at committee talking about it. The Wildland Leagues, and thank goodness for their work, that CPAWS, they have done amazing work. Unifor Environment Committee, so we have the unions involved. Wildlife Preservation Canada, Citizens Environment Alliance, Essex County Field Naturalists, Green UMA. This is a youth activist group, and we have Friends of Ojibway and Save Ojibway. Local residents have put in thousands of petitions. And now, Madam Speaker, this area that we propose is part of the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nation that includes the Ojibway, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. And again, they did everything right for our community and what they were asked for back in the War of 1812. Now they are part of this partnership right now, and the full consultation and respect for consultation is in the Parks of Canada Act. So that's why Bill C-248 goes forward with solidarity, because it's the right thing for the right place for the right people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.